Deep in the forgotten woods of Northern California stands a 1,000-year-old oak tree that locals whisper about but never approach. Sarah Martinez, clutching her 6-year-old daughter Maya's hand, had nowhere else to go. Evicted 3 days ago, with only $17 to her name, she followed an old hiking trail, hoping to find temporary shelter before nightfall. But Sarah isn't just any desperate mother. She's a former archaeologist who walked away from her career after a tragic dig accident claimed her husband's life. When she pressed her palm against the oak's ancient bark, something extraordinary happened. A hidden doorway opened, revealing rooms carved within the massive trunk itself. What Sarah discovered in those hollowed chambers would change everything: maps, artifacts, and a spiral staircase leading deep underground to a burrow filled with treasures worth $250 million. But she's not alone in the woods anymore. Dark SUVs circle the tree line, and men with expensive equipment are closing in fast. The question that will determine everything: can a mother with nothing left to lose outsmart professional killers who've spent years hunting this exact treasure? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The October wind bit through Sarah's threadbare jacket as she and Maya stumbled through the undergrowth. Her daughter's small fingers were ice cold, despite the worn mittens Sarah had bought at a gas station that morning with their last $5. The remaining $12 crinkled in her pocket, enough for maybe one more meal if they were careful. "Mama, I'm tired," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. Sarah's heart clenched. They'd been walking for hours, following what looked like an old deer path deeper into the Mendocino National Forest. She'd heard other homeless people talking about caves in these hills, places where you could wait out a storm or hide from rangers who might call social services. The thought of losing Maya terrified her more than sleeping in the cold. "Just a little further, baby. We're going to find somewhere safe and warm." The lie came easily. Sarah had become an expert at lying to her daughter over the past 3 months. Lies about when Daddy was coming home. Lies about why they had to leave their apartment. Lies about everything being okay. The massive oak appeared suddenly through the mist, impossibly large and ancient. Sarah had studied enough dendrology in graduate school to recognize something extraordinary when she saw it. This tree was old, older than anything that should exist in this forest. Its trunk was so wide that 20 people holding hands couldn't encircle it. "It's like a fairy tale tree," Maya breathed, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. Sarah approached carefully, her archaeologist's instincts overriding her desperation. Something felt different here. The air hummed with an energy she couldn't identify. As a scientist, she should have been skeptical. As a mother with nowhere else to turn, she was willing to believe in miracles. The bark was warm beneath her palm. No, that was impossible. The temperature had been dropping all day. But as Sarah pressed her hand flat against the rough surface, she felt genuine warmth radiating from within the tree. More than that, she felt a slight vibration, like a pulse. "Mama, look!" A seam appeared in the bark where her hand rested, widening into a doorway tall enough for an adult to walk through. Sarah jerked backward, but Maya was already moving forward with the fearless curiosity of childhood. "Wait!" Sarah caught her daughter's arm. But she was staring too. Beyond the threshold lay a softly lit chamber carved directly into the living wood. The walls curved organically, lined with phosphorescent moss that provided a gentle green glow. The air inside was warm and dry. Sarah's scientific mind raced through possibilities. Hollowed trees weren't unheard of. Fire or disease could create cavities. But this was different. This was deliberate, crafted. The smooth walls showed tool marks that looked both ancient and purposeful. "Can we go inside?" Maya's eyes were wide with wonder instead of the hollow exhaustion that had haunted them for weeks. Sarah hesitated. Every rational instinct screamed danger, but Maya was shivering, and darkness was falling fast. Whatever this place was, it offered shelter. They stepped inside together. The chamber was larger than it appeared from outside, extending back into the tree's massive trunk. Carved shelves lined the walls, holding objects that made Sarah's breath catch. Clay vessels with markings she didn't recognize, metal tools that looked impossibly old, yet perfectly preserved. And everywhere, maps, carved into the walls themselves, drawn on bark paper, scratched into stone tablets. "Mama, there's stairs." Maya was right. In the far corner, a spiral staircase descended into darkness, carved directly into the tree's root system. The phosphorescent moss continued down the walls, providing just enough light to see the first few steps. Sarah's archaeological training warred with maternal caution. This was a discovery that could rewrite history, but it could also be dangerous. The decision was taken from her when she heard the distant rumble of engines approaching through the forest. The morning light filtered through leaves that shouldn't have existed on a dead tree, casting dancing shadows across the marble floor beneath Sarah's feet. She blinked hard. Certain exhaustion was playing tricks on her mind, but the impossible scene remained unchanged. The gnarled trunk she had pressed against in desperation now revealed itself as an elaborate doorway, its bark-like texture giving way to polished wood inlaid with intricate golden patterns. Emma stirred in her arms, mumbling something about breakfast, and Sarah's maternal instincts overrode her bewilderment. Whatever this place was, it offered shelter, and her daughter's pale cheeks and rattling cough demanded immediate attention. "Mama, where are we?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper, as her fever-bright eyes took in the impossible interior. "Somewhere safe, sweetheart. Somewhere warm." Sarah hoped the words were true as she stepped deeper into the mansion that existed within, or perhaps beneath, the ancient tree. The ceilings soared above them, supported by columns that appeared to be living wood, their surfaces breathing with an almost imperceptible pulse. The great hall stretched before them, furnished with pieces that belonged in a museum or a fairy tale. Tapestries depicting scenes of forests and underground kingdoms hung between tall windows that showed not the storm-ravaged hillside they had fled, but sunlit gardens where impossible flowers bloomed in eternal spring. Sarah's practical mind catalogued details even as wonder threatened to overwhelm her. The air smelled of cedar and something else, something ancient and green that made her think of deep earth and growing things. No dust coated the furniture, despite the obvious age of everything around them. Candles burned in crystal sconces, their flames steady despite the absence of any visible caretaker. "I'm hungry," Emma murmured against Sarah's shoulder, and as if summoned by the words, Sarah noticed a dining room visible through an archway. A simple meal waited on the long table, bread that steamed as if fresh from the oven, cheese, fruit that gleamed with impossible perfection, and a pitcher of what looked like fresh milk. Common sense warred with desperation. Everything about this place defied explanation, but Emma's hollow cheeks and the memory of their empty pockets made the decision for her. She carried her daughter to the table and settled her in one of the high-backed chairs. "Just a little at first," Sarah murmured, tearing off a piece of bread. It was warm, soft, and tasted better than anything she could remember. Emma ate with the careful, measured bites of a child who had learned not to expect enough, but color began returning to her cheeks almost immediately. As Emma ate, Sarah explored with cautious steps. Room after room revealed itself, a library with books that seemed to rearrange themselves when she wasn't looking directly at them, a sitting room with a fireplace where flames danced without consuming the logs, bedrooms with beds made up as if expecting guests. In one room, she found clothes in exactly her and Emma's sizes hanging in an otherwise empty wardrobe. But it was the study that stopped her cold. Maps covered one wall, not modern maps, but hand-drawn charts showing lands that no longer existed, or perhaps had never existed at all. The desk held papers covered in scripts she didn't recognize, and in the center of it all sat a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age, but its words written in clear, modern English. "For those who find sanctuary in the heart of the great tree, know that you are welcome, but know also that all shelter comes with responsibility. What lies beneath has waited longer than human memory, and those who seek it come not as guests but as thieves." Sarah's hands trembled as she turned the page. The roots go deeper than earth, deeper than stone, down to chambers where the true treasure waits. It is not gold, though gold accompanies it. It is not jewels, though they glitter in the darkness below. It is something older, something that was buried with purpose, something that must not wake. A sound from the main hall made her freeze, Emma's laughter, bright and clear for the first time in weeks, but underneath it, something else, a distant rumbling, like heavy vehicles on an impossible road. Sarah rushed back to find Emma standing before one of the tall windows, pointing excitedly at the garden view. But when Sarah looked, she saw not gardens but the storm-lashed hillside they had fled, and cutting through the rain came headlights, multiple vehicles climbing the treacherous path with grim determination. "Mama, look at the pretty flowers," Emma said, but her words seemed to come from very far away as Sarah watched armed figures emerge from the lead vehicle, their movements purposeful and predatory. The journal's warning echoed in her mind as she gathered Emma close. Whatever treasure lay beneath this impossible sanctuary, others knew of it, and they were coming. The morning light filtered through leaves that seemed to shimmer with an inner luminescence, casting dancing shadows across the marble floor where Elena had slept. She woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the grandeur surrounding her. For a heartbeat, she wondered if the previous night had been an elaborate dream born from exhaustion and desperation. But Sophia's gentle breathing beside her and the cool touch of polished stone beneath her palm confirmed the impossible reality. They were inside a tree that defied every law of nature she understood. Elena rose quietly, careful not to disturb her daughter, and padded barefoot across the floor. The mansion's interior stretched before her in the morning light, revealing details that had been hidden in yesterday's twilight. Intricate carvings adorned the walls, not mere decorations, but what appeared to be a historical record. Figures in flowing robes tended to seedlings, their hands glowing with the same ethereal light she'd witnessed in the roots. She traced her finger along one particularly detailed carving. The stone was warm, almost alive, and as her skin made contact, the carved figures seemed to pulse with golden light. Elena jerked her hand back, heart hammering. "Mama?" Sophia's sleepy voice echoed from behind her. "I'm here, mija." Elena forced her voice to remain calm. "Did you sleep well?" Sophia stretched, her expression brightening as she took in their surroundings with the adaptability only children possessed. "It's like a fairy tale house. Can we explore?" Elena's maternal instincts warred with her curiosity. Every rational part of her screamed that they should leave, find conventional help, return to the world that made sense. But where would they go? Their old life had crumbled, leaving them with nothing but each other and the clothes on their backs. "Stay close to me," Elena said finally. "We'll look around together." They ventured deeper into the tree mansion, discovering room after room that seemed to exist in impossible spaces. A library with books written in languages Elena didn't recognize, their pages seeming to turn themselves in a breeze that couldn't exist. A kitchen where crystal formations grew from the walls, some pulsing with soft light, others humming with barely audible melodies. But it was the spiral staircase that truly defied comprehension. Carved from what appeared to be living wood, it descended into the earth far deeper than any tree's root system should extend. As they stood at its precipice, a warm draught carried strange scents upward, metal and earth, but also something sweeter, like honey mixed with starlight. "Should we go down?" Sophia whispered, her voice filled with wonder rather than fear. Elena peered into the depths, seeing the stairs wind away into a golden glow that seemed to call to something deep in her chest. But before she could answer, a sound from above froze her blood, the distant rumble of engines. She pulled Sophia behind the staircase's central column as footsteps crashed through the forest above. Voices carried down through the tree's trunk, muffled but urgent. "The readings are definitely coming from this area," a man's voice said. "The electromagnetic signatures match the Calderon expedition reports." "Those were from 1892, another voice replied. "This one female and sharp with authority." You're certain the translation was accurate? Dr. Morrison verified it herself before. The first voice trailed off meaningfully. Elena's blood chilled. These weren't lost hikers or park rangers. They spoke with the casual efficiency of people accustomed to taking what they wanted, regardless of who might be in their way. "Split up and search," the woman commanded. "If the tree is here, the vault can't be far. And remember, we're not the only ones looking. The consortium's team was spotted in Guatemala last week." The footsteps moved away, but Elena knew they'd return. Whatever this place truly was, they weren't the only ones who knew about it. And somehow she doubted these people would be as accommodating as the mysterious tree had been. She looked down at Sophia, who pressed close to her side with wide, frightened eyes. Her daughter's trust was absolute, her faith that her mother would keep her safe unwavering. But Elena felt woefully unprepared for whatever was unfolding around them. The golden glow from the depths below seemed to pulse more urgently now, as if responding to the threat above. Elena found herself drawn to it, sensing that answers lay in those illuminated depths. But answers often came with their own dangers, and she had more than herself to consider. "Mama," Sophia whispered, "the tree feels scared." Elena blinked. "What do you mean? Can't you feel it? Like when you're worried about me, but trying not to show it." Looking around with fresh awareness, Elena realized Sophia was right. The warm, welcoming sensation from the night before had shifted to something more urgent, more protective. The tree wasn't just sheltering them, it was actively hiding them. But from what? And more importantly, what lay buried in those golden depths that made people willing to kill for it? The ancient door groaned shut behind them, sealing out the storm with an otherworldly finality. Maya pressed her back against the weathered wood, her heart hammering as she tried to process what had just happened. The tree, hollow, impossibly vast, stretched above them like a cathedral carved from living timber. Soft, golden light emanated from somewhere she couldn't identify, casting dancing shadows across walls that curved and flowed like frozen water. "Mama, look," Emma whispered, her small hand tugging at Maya's rain-soaked sleeve. Maya followed her daughter's gaze upward, gasping at the sight. Spiraling staircases wound around the interior walls, leading to balconies and doorways that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Books lined impossible shelves that grew directly from the tree's living walls, their leather spines gleaming in the mysterious light. Furniture that appeared to have been coaxed rather than carved from the wood itself dotted the space. Chairs with armrests that still bore leaves. Tables whose surfaces rippled like bark. "This isn't real," Maya breathed, but even as she spoke the words, she could smell the rich earthiness of the wood, feel the gentle warmth radiating from the walls. Her practical mind reeled, searching for explanations that didn't exist. Emma had already ventured deeper into the space, her earlier fear replaced by wonder. She traced her fingers along a wall where tiny flowers bloomed in perpetual spring, their petals soft and impossibly vibrant. "It's like being inside a fairy tale," she said, and for the first time in months, Maya heard genuine joy in her daughter's voice. A sound from above made them both freeze, a gentle creaking, like footsteps on old floorboards. Maya instinctively pulled Emma closer, her mother's instincts overriding her amazement. They weren't alone. "Hello?" Maya called out, her voice echoing strangely in the organic architecture. "We're just sheltering from the storm. We don't want any trouble." Silence answered her, but Maya caught movement in her peripheral vision, shadows shifting among the upper balconies. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from what appeared to be a doorway formed by two intertwining branches. The woman who descended the spiral staircase was ancient yet ageless, her silver hair flowing like water, her clothes seeming to be woven from moonbeams and moss. Her eyes held depths that reminded Maya of old forests and forgotten secrets. "Trouble," the woman repeated, her voice like wind through leaves. "Yes, I suspect trouble follows you, daughter of sorrow." Her gaze shifted to Emma, and her expression softened. "But not from you, little seed. You carry light." "Who are you?" Maya managed, keeping Emma behind her, despite the woman's gentle demeanor. I am keeper. I am guardian. I am the one who tends what should not be disturbed. The woman reached the bottom of the staircase and moved with fluid grace across the living floor. You seek shelter from more than rain, I think. Maya's throat tightened. Something about this strange woman's presence made deception feel impossible. We have nowhere else to go. And so the tree called to you. The keeper nodded, as if this explained everything. It does that sometimes, when the need is great and the heart is pure. She gestured to the space around them. Welcome to the heart of Aeon, last sanctuary of the verdant. The verdant? Emma spoke up, her curiosity overcoming her shyness. The keeper smiled, and when she did, tiny luminescent flowers bloomed along the nearby walls. Those who understood that some things are worth more than gold, child. They built this place as a guardian, a protector of something precious beyond measure. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with their rain-soaked clothes. Protected from what? From those who would take without understanding, who would destroy in their hunger for possession. The keeper's expression grew troubled. The verdant knew such people would come eventually. They always do. As if summoned by her words, a distant rumble echoed from outside, not thunder, but engines. Multiple vehicles moving through the forest with purpose. Maya's blood turned to ice as she recognized the sound. Marcus had found them. The keeper's head tilted, listening to something beyond human hearing. When she looked back at Maya, her ancient eyes held a terrible knowledge. They come for what lies beneath, the heart's deepest secret. She moved to Emma, kneeling to place gentle hands on the child's shoulders. You must choose, guardian mother. Will you flee again, or will you stand? The choice will determine more than your fate. The engines grew closer, and Maya could hear voices now, harsh, demanding voices that made her stomach clench with remembered fear. But as she looked around the impossible sanctuary, at her daughter's face illuminated by living light, at the keeper whose eyes held centuries of wisdom, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in months. She felt ready to fight. What lies beneath? Maya asked, her voice steady despite the approaching threat. The keeper smiled, and the tree itself seemed to pulse with ancient power. The seed of tomorrow, child, the very future of the world. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, broken only by Emma's shallow breathing from behind the curtained alcove where she'd hidden her daughter. The stranger's eyes, pale blue and calculating, swept across the room's impossible architecture, taking in details that made Lila's stomach clench with dread. Remarkable craftsmanship, he murmured, running weathered fingers along the bark-textured walls. The Thornfield family certainly knew how to blend function with concealment. Though I suspect you've already discovered that. Haven't you, Mrs.? Just Lila. She kept her voice steady, though her hand inched toward the poker beside the fireplace. And you are? Marcus Blackwood, antiquities dealer. His smile revealed teeth too white, too perfect. Though today I'm more interested in what lies beneath this magnificent structure than what adorns its walls. The words confirmed her worst fears. Somehow, this man knew about the underground chamber, about the treasure that had called to her through the tree's ancient roots. But how? She and Emma were the first people to set foot in this place for decades. The dust layers had proved that much. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Lila said carefully. This is just shelter. We're travelers, nothing more. Blackwood's laugh was soft, but held no warmth. Oh, my dear woman. Do you really think the Thornfield hoard has remained hidden for over a century without attracting attention? Your little expedition yesterday evening was quite illuminating. Ice flooded Lila's veins. He'd been watching them, watching as she descended into the earth, as Emma had waited above, as they'd gazed in wonder at the impossible wealth below. How long had he been out there in the darkness? The entrance is cleverly concealed, he continued, circling the room with predatory grace. Took me considerable time to locate it, even with the original family maps. Imagine my surprise when I arrived to find fresh footprints leading down into the depths. Maps? The word escaped before Lila could stop it. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. Blackwood reached into his jacket and withdrew a leather portfolio, age darkened and cracked. The Thornfield family wasn't as secretive as they believed. Before their unfortunate demise, certain documents found their way into private collections, including detailed schematics of this remarkable hiding place. He spread the papers on the room's central table, and Lila found herself drawn forward despite every instinct screaming at her to run. The drawings were intricate, showing not just the mansion's layout, but the tunnels beneath, the chamber she'd discovered, and, her blood turned to slush, what appeared to be multiple other passages extending deep underground. "The treasure you found," Blackwood said, watching her face intently, "represents only a fraction of what the Thornfields accumulated. They were quite prolific in their acquisitions during the gold rush era, much of it obtained through less than legitimate means, which is why they needed such elaborate security measures." "What do you want?" Lila's voice came out smaller than intended. "Partnership." The word hung in the air like smoke. "You've already accessed the primary vault. I have maps to 6 others. Together, we could recover a fortune that would make yesterday's discovery look like pocket change." Behind the curtain, she heard the faintest rustle as Emma shifted position. Blackwood's head turned toward the sound with the fluid motion of a predator detecting prey. "Your daughter, I presume?" "Charming child. I saw her briefly through my binoculars yesterday." His tone remained conversational, but the implied threat struck Lila like a physical blow. Such a dangerous place for a young one to explore. So many ways an unfortunate accident could occur in these old tunnels. The words crystallized something hard and dangerous in Lila's chest. She'd spent months running, months afraid, months letting circumstances push her family from place to place, like debris in a current. But this man, this smiling, calculating stranger who spoke so casually about threats to her daughter, had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "What kind of partnership?" she asked, though her mind was already racing ahead, calculating angles and possibilities. "Simple. You provide access and local reconnaissance. I provide expertise and, shall we say, startup capital for the excavation equipment we'll need." His pale eyes glittered. "A 70-30 split seems reasonable, given my superior knowledge of the cache locations." 70-30. In his favor, no doubt. And once he had what he wanted, what guarantee did she and Emma have that he'd honor any agreement? Men like Blackwood didn't leave loose ends, especially loose ends who could identify them to authorities. "I'll need time to consider," Lila said. "Of course." He began folding the maps with deliberate care, but not too much time. "Others are interested in the Thornfield legacy. I'd hate for our opportunity to be complicated by additional parties. More treasure hunters." The implications settled over her like a shroud as Blackwood moved toward the door that had been seamlessly disguised as part of the tree trunk moments before. "I'll return tomorrow morning for your answer," he said. "Sleep well." The morning light filtered through the crystalline branches above, casting rainbow fragments across the marble floor where Sarah had spent a restless night. Emma still slept curled against her side, but Sarah's eyes had been open for hours, studying the impossible architecture that surrounded them. Every logical part of her mind insisted this couldn't be real, yet the cold smoothness of the marble beneath her and the gentle warmth radiating from the luminescent walls confirmed otherwise. She eased away from Emma and stood, her muscles protesting from sleeping on the hard surface. The grand staircase beckoned, its banister carved with intricate symbols that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. Each step echoed despite her careful movements, the sound swallowed by the vast space above. The second floor revealed a maze of corridors lined with doors of different materials, some wood, others appearing to be made of compressed earth or woven vines. Sarah chose the nearest wooden door and found herself in what could only be described as a library, though unlike any she'd ever seen. Books floated gently in mid-air, their pages turning themselves, while others rested on shelves that grew directly from the walls like branches. A leather-bound journal lay open on a reading table as if someone had just stepped away. The handwriting was elegant but faded, written in English that felt archaic. Sarah leaned closer, making out fragments. The convergence approaches, roots deeper than we imagined. She who tends the tree must understand the price. Footsteps on the stairs below made her freeze. Emma's voice called out, small and frightened. "Mummy, where are you?" Sarah rushed back, finding her daughter standing at the base of the staircase, tears streaming down her face. "I thought you left me," Emma whispered. "Never." Sarah pulled her close, feeling the tremor in the small body. "I was just exploring a little. Want to see what I found?" They returned to the library together, Emma's wonder overriding her fear as books drifted past like gentle birds. One volume, bound in deep green leather, descended slowly to hover before them. Its pages fluttered open to reveal detailed illustrations of the tree, not as they'd found it, but surrounded by a thriving community. People tended gardens between the massive roots, children played in clearings that sparkled with the same inner light as the mansion's walls. "It's like a fairy tale," Emma breathed. But Sarah noticed details that chilled her. In the margins, smaller text described guardians who had failed in their duties. The fate that befell them was illustrated in uncomfortable detail, bodies withered and absorbed into the tree's root system, their essence feeding the ancient magic. The sound of engines approaching from outside made them both look up. Through the crystalline canopy, Sarah could see black SUVs pulling up the dirt road she and Emma had traveled the night before. Men emerged, armed and moving with military precision. "We need to hide," Sarah said, grabbing Emma's hand. But as they moved toward the staircase, the mansion itself seemed to respond to the threat. Walls shifted subtly, creating new passages where none had existed moments before. A corridor opened to their left, lined with the same root-like supports as the main hall but narrower, more intimate. They followed the passage as voices echoed from below, harsh, commanding tones that made Sarah's skin crawl. The corridor led to a small chamber where water bubbled up from the floor in a natural spring, the walls covered in the same shifting symbols they'd seen throughout the mansion. Emma touched one of the symbols, and it flared with soft light. Suddenly, images filled the water's surface like a living mirror. Sarah could see the men below, 6 of them, led by a tall figure with silver hair and cold eyes. They moved through the mansion with familiarity that suggested this wasn't their first visit. "Mitchell, check the upper levels," the leader commanded. "The tree's been active recently. Someone triggered the awakening." Sarah's blood ran cold. They knew about the tree's true nature, had been watching for signs of activation. Her arrival with Emma hadn't been chance. They'd been drawn here, but so had these hunters. The water mirror showed another man examining the journal Sarah had found, his scarred hands turning pages with reverence. "The convergence cycle is beginning," he reported. "We're not too late, but we need to move fast. The Guardian bond will strengthen with time." Guardian bond. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. The tree hadn't just provided them shelter, it had chosen them, marked them somehow. The warmth she'd felt, the way the mansion responded to threats, Emma's natural comfort with the impossible architecture around them. They were connected now, part of whatever ancient system protected this place. Emma tugged on her sleeve, pointing to new symbols appearing on the walls. These glowed brighter, pulsing with urgent light. Sarah didn't understand the language, but the meaning felt clear: warning, protection, choice. Outside, she could hear the men spreading through the mansion, their voices growing closer. Whatever decision she made in the next few minutes would determine not just their survival, but their entire future. The sound of engines cut through the morning air like chainsaws through silk. Elena's blood turned to ice as she pressed herself against the mansion's front window, watching 3 black SUVs roll up the dirt path she and Maya had walked just yesterday. The vehicles moved with predatory precision, their tinted windows revealing nothing of the occupants within. "Maya, come here. Now." Elena's voice carried an urgency that made her daughter drop the ancient book she'd been examining and rush to her mother's side. Through the glass, they watched as doors opened in synchronized movements. 6 figures emerged, all dressed in tactical gear despite the early hour. The man leading them was tall and broad-shouldered, his salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed. Even from a distance, Elena could see the calculating coldness in his eyes as he surveyed the massive tree that concealed their sanctuary. "Mom, who are they?" Maya whispered, instinctively moving closer to Elena. Before Elena could respond, the man raised what looked like a sophisticated scanning device, sweeping it slowly across the tree's trunk. The device emitted a series of rapid beeps that grew more frequent as he approached the hidden entrance. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Somehow, impossibly, they knew exactly what they were looking for. The mansion's ancient wood seemed to sense the danger. Elena felt a subtle vibration through the floorboards, as if the structure itself was awakening to defend against the intrusion. The amber veins in the walls pulsed with a slightly brighter light, casting dancing shadows across the room where mother and daughter crouched. "Margaret," Elena called softly, hoping the mysterious woman would appear with answers, with a plan, with anything that might help them escape this nightmare. But only silence answered her plea. The lead man spoke into a radio clipped to his vest, his words muffled by the thick walls but his tone unmistakably authoritative. 2 of his companions began unpacking equipment from the vehicles, more scanning devices, what appeared to be drilling equipment, and cases that Elena suspected contained weapons. A memory surfaced from the previous night's reading. One of the journal entries had mentioned something about the Seekers and those who would steal the Earth's gift for greed. The warning had seemed abstract then, a relic from a bygone era. Now it felt prophetic. "We need to get to the underground chamber," Elena decided, remembering the spiral staircase Margaret had shown them. If these people were here for the treasure, the deepest part of the mansion might offer better protection, or at least buy them time to figure out an escape. They moved quickly through the corridors, Elena carrying the canvas bag with Margaret's journals, while Maya clutched her small backpack. Behind them, Elena could hear the faint sound of machinery starting up. Whatever scanning technology the intruders possessed, it was powerful enough to penetrate the tree's ancient camouflage. The spiral staircase descended into darkness, lit only by the increasingly bright amber veins that now pulsed with an almost urgent rhythm. Elena realized the tree, the mansion, was responding to the threat above. The very structure seemed to be drawing energy from somewhere deep underground, preparing for what was to come. As they reached the chamber with the crystalline formations, Maya gasped and pointed upward. Through the mansion's wooden ceiling they could hear voices, clearer now. The intruders had found the entrance. Heat signatures show at least 2 people inside. Careful with the excavation. The client wants the contents intact. No witnesses as discussed. Elena's blood ran cold at the last phrase. These weren't just treasure hunters looking to make a quick profit. They were professionals, and they'd been sent by someone who knew exactly what lay beneath the ancient tree. The amber light in the chamber suddenly flared, and Elena felt a strange tingling sensation in her fingertips. When she looked down, she saw that her hands were glowing with the same golden light that coursed through the mansion's walls. Maya's eyes widened in wonder rather than fear. "Mom, you look like the tree," she whispered. Elena stared at her luminous hands, understanding beginning to dawn. Margaret's disappearance, the way the mansion had revealed itself to them, the protective barrier that had kept them safe through the night, it wasn't coincidence. The tree had chosen them, just as it had chosen Margaret decades ago. Above them, the sound of splintering wood echoed through the chamber. The intruders had breached the outer defenses and were now inside the mansion proper. Elena could hear their heavy footsteps on the floors above, systematic and searching. She looked at Maya, saw her own determination reflected in her daughter's young face, and made a choice that would change everything. If the ancient tree needed guardians, If the treasure buried beneath required protection from those who would abuse its power, then she and Maya would stand as its defenders. The golden light flowing through her veins pulsed stronger, and Elena felt the tree's centuries of accumulated wisdom beginning to whisper its secrets. The morning light filtering through the crystal dome cast dancing patterns across Maya's face as she stirred awake. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The soft bed beneath her felt like a dream after weeks of sleeping in her car. Then reality crashed back, the hidden mansion, the impossible tree, and somewhere far below, a treasure that people were willing to kill for. Emma was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor and speaking in hushed tones to what appeared to be empty air. Maya's heart clenched as she watched her daughter's animated gestures, remembering how Emma used to have tea parties with invisible friends back when they had a home. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" Emma turned, her eyes bright with excitement. "The lady. She's been telling me about the history of this place. Did you know this tree has been here for over 300 years? Maya felt the familiar chill that had been haunting her since they arrived. "What lady, Emma?" "The one in the pretty dress. She says her name is Isadora." Emma pointed to an ornate mirror across the room. "She lives in the reflections." Maya's blood ran cold as she looked at the mirror. For just an instant, she could have sworn she saw the shadow of a woman in period clothing, but when she blinked, there was only her own frightened reflection staring back. "Emma, I think we should—" A sharp crack echoed through the mansion, followed by the distant sound of splintering wood. Maya grabbed Emma's hand and rushed to the nearest window. Below, 3 figures in dark clothing were examining the base of the great tree, one of them holding what looked like a metal detector. "They found us," Maya whispered. Her mind raced through their options. The tree's entrance had sealed itself behind them yesterday, and she had no idea how to open it from the inside. Another crack resonated through the structure, this one closer. The intruders weren't just searching anymore, they were breaking in. Maya pulled Emma toward the center of the room, away from the windows. "Listen to me very carefully. We need to find another way out. But the lady says we shouldn't leave. She says the tree protects what's meant to stay hidden." Before Maya could respond, a section of the wall began to glow with the same ethereal light they'd seen in the tunnels. The wood grain shifted and swirled, forming what appeared to be a doorway. Maya hesitated. Every instinct told her not to trust anything in this place, but with treasure hunters breaking in above them, they had little choice. The passage beyond led downward into darkness, lit only by phosphorescent veins running through the walls like frozen lightning. Maya could hear Emma whispering behind her, still carrying on her conversation with the mysterious Isadora. "She says there are 3 ways into the deep chambers," Emma relayed, "but only one way out alive. Emma, please stop. She's trying to help us, Mama. The bad men upstairs, they don't know about the Guardians." As if summoned by her words, a low rumbling began to emanate from somewhere below them. The sound was organic, like breathing but impossibly large. Maya felt the hair on her arms stand up as she realized the phosphorescent veins were pulsing in rhythm with the breathing. They emerged into a vast underground cavern that defied explanation. The space was enormous, easily the size of a cathedral, with walls that seemed to be carved from living wood. Massive roots hung from the ceiling like chandeliers, each one glowing with soft bioluminescence. And there, in the center of it all, was a sight that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. Treasure. More than she had ever imagined could exist in one place. Gold coins spilled from ancient chests. Precious gems caught the ethereal light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls, and artifacts from dozens of different cultures and time periods lay scattered across the cavern floor as if deposited by centuries of collectors. But it wasn't the wealth that made Maya's heart pound. It was what surrounded it. Skeletons, dozens of them, scattered among the treasure like macabre decorations. Some still wore the remnants of clothing from different eras, suggesting they had died at different times across the centuries. "The lady says they all tried to take more than they gave," Emma said quietly. The tree doesn't like greedy people. The rumbling grew louder, and Maya realized it was coming from the walls themselves. The roots hanging from the ceiling began to move, writhing like serpents awakened from a deep sleep. One of them brushed against her shoulder, and she jerked away, pulling Emma closer. Above them, the sound of breaking wood grew more urgent. The treasure hunters were getting closer, and Maya was beginning to understand that escape might not be an option for any of them. This place had been keeping its secrets for 3 centuries, and it didn't seem inclined to let anyone leave with knowledge of its existence. The breathing sound crescendoed, and Maya felt the ancient intelligence of the tree focusing its attention on the intruders above and on them. Sarah pressed her back against the cool stone wall, listening to the distant echo of voices drifting through the mansion's corridors. The treasure hunters had found their way inside faster than she'd anticipated. Marcus Blackwood's voice carried clearly through the ancient halls, barking orders to his men with the confidence of someone who believed he'd already won. Fan out. Check every room, every passage. They can't have gone far with the child in tow. Emma stirred in Sarah's arms, and she quickly placed a gentle hand over her daughter's mouth, whispering reassurances. They were hidden in what appeared to be a servant's passage behind the kitchen, one of dozens of secret corridors that honeycombed the tree mansion's interior. The structure was far more complex than she'd initially realized, with rooms that seemed to shift and change when she wasn't looking directly at them. The ancient magic that sustained this place was unlike anything from the modern world. Walls breathed with a subtle rhythm, and doorways sometimes led to entirely different rooms than they had moments before. It was as if the mansion itself was alive, protecting its secrets through deliberate confusion. "Sarah!" The voice came from directly behind her, and she spun around, nearly dropping Emma. It was the old man, Thomas, emerging from what had appeared to be solid stone. His weathered face was grave, his eyes reflecting an urgency she hadn't seen before. "We need to move. Now." Blackwood has devices that can detect the mansion's true layout. The protective enchantments won't hide you much longer. Sarah shifted Emma to her hip, studying Thomas's face. "Who are you really? And don't tell me you're just a groundskeeper. You know too much about this place, about what's happening." Thomas hesitated, glancing toward the main corridor where footsteps were growing closer. "I'm the last guardian of the Thornfield legacy. My family has protected this secret for over 2 centuries. Guardian of what, exactly? The treasure Blackwood mentioned? Not treasure in the way he thinks." Thomas gestured for them to follow him deeper into the passage, something far more dangerous. "The Thornfield family didn't just build a house in a tree, Sarah. They bound something ancient here, something that should never be released." They moved quickly through a narrow corridor that sloped downward, the walls becoming rougher, more natural. Sarah realized they were now inside the actual tree trunk, moving through passages that had been carved into living wood centuries ago. "The family made a bargain," Thomas continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "In exchange for protection and prosperity, they agreed to keep the entity contained. But the binding requires specific bloodline magic to maintain. When the last Thornfield died 50 years ago, the containment began to weaken." Emma lifted her head from Sarah's shoulder, looking around with wide eyes. "Mama, the walls are glowing." Sarah looked up and saw that her daughter was right. A soft, greenish luminescence emanated from the wood around them, pulsing with that same rhythmic breathing they'd noticed throughout the mansion. "That's the entity's influence growing stronger," Thomas explained. "It feeds on life force, on the energy that flows through this tree. The mansion, all of its magic, it's all designed to keep that power contained and controlled." A thunderous crash echoed from somewhere above them, followed by Blackwood's triumphant shout. "Found something! There's a passage behind this wall!" Thomas quickened his pace, leading them to a heavy wooden door bound with iron. Ancient symbols were carved deep into both the wood and metal, and Sarah could feel power radiating from them like heat from a fire. "This leads to the heart chamber," Thomas said, producing an old brass key. "It's the only place that's truly safe, but it's also where the binding is strongest." If Blackwood breaks through the outer defenses, the entity will try to use him to complete its escape. Sarah grabbed his arm as he moved to unlock the door. What happens if it gets free? Thomas's expression was grim. According to the records, it consumed 3 villages before the Thornfields contained it. That was when the population was scattered and people were more isolated. In today's world, he shook his head, it would be unstoppable. The sound of splintering wood echoed from the passage behind them. Blackwood's men had found their trail. There's something else, Thomas said quickly, turning the key. The entity is drawn to strong emotional bonds, particularly between family members. It will try to use your connection to Emma against you. The door swung open, revealing a circular chamber carved from living heartwood. The walls pulsed with that same green light, but here it was almost blinding. In the center of the room sat an ornate chest, its surface covered with the same protective symbols they'd seen throughout the mansion. Is that? Sarah started to ask. The anchor point, Thomas confirmed. The physical focus that maintains the binding. Whatever happens, Sarah, that chest cannot be opened. Behind them, voices grew closer, and Sarah heard Emma whimper softly. She stepped across the threshold into the heart chamber, feeling the ancient magic wash over them like a tide of electricity and starlight. The ancient mechanisms groaned as Elena descended deeper into the bowels of the tree mansion, her flashlight beam cutting through darkness that seemed almost solid. Behind her, Maya's breathing came in short, frightened gasps. The wooden stairs, if they could still be called wood after centuries of transformation, pulsed with a faint luminescence that made Elena's skin crawl. "Mom, I don't like this," Maya whispered, her small hand gripping Elena's jacket. "Something's wrong with this place." Elena couldn't disagree. The deeper they went, the more the tree's influence became apparent. The walls weren't just carved from wood, they were alive, growing, breathing. Roots thick as her torso snaked along the ceiling, occasionally dripping a phosphorescent sap that hissed when it hit the ground. "I know, sweetheart, but we need to find another way out." Elena tried to keep her voice steady, but the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a hidden mansion anymore. Whatever ancient power resided here was awakening, and their presence had triggered something that should have remained dormant. The stairs ended abruptly at a circular chamber, carved from what appeared to be a single, massive root system. In the center sat an ornate chest, its surface covered in the same intricate symbols they'd seen throughout the mansion. But unlike the decorative carvings above, these symbols glowed with an internal light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "The treasure," Elena breathed, understanding flooding through her. This wasn't just valuable, it was the source. The heart of whatever force had transformed this tree into something beyond nature. Maya tugged at her jacket. "Mom, look." Elena followed her daughter's gaze upward and felt her blood freeze. The ceiling was moving, not the slow, organic movement of growing wood, but the deliberate, predatory motion of something hunting. Thick, tentacle-like roots were descending toward them, their tips gleaming with thorns that looked disturbingly like teeth. "Run," Elena whispered. Then, louder, "Run!" They bolted for the stairs, but the roots moved faster than seemed possible. One wrapped around Elena's ankle, its thorns biting through her jeans and into flesh. She cried out, stumbling, and heard Maya scream her name. "Keep going!" Elena shouted, grabbing a piece of broken stone from the floor and striking at the root. To her surprise, it recoiled, releasing her with what sounded almost like a hiss of pain. They took the stairs 3 at a time, the chamber's glow fading behind them as the mansion itself seemed to pursue them upward. The walls around them groaned and shifted, passages rearranging themselves like a living maze. What had been a straight corridor when they descended was now a twisted pathway with branches leading into deeper darkness. "This way," Maya called out, pointing toward a faint light ahead. Elena didn't question her daughter's instincts. Maya had always been perceptive, and right now, that might be their only advantage. They emerged into the main hall just as the front door exploded inward. Marcus stood silhouetted against the dim morning light, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Behind him, two of his men raised their weapons. "Touching reunion, ladies," Marcus said, stepping into the hall. "But playtime's over. Where is it?" Elena positioned herself protectively in front of Maya, acutely aware that they were trapped between Marcus and whatever malevolent force was rising from below. The mansion around them continued to shift and change, walls breathing, floor rippling like water. "You don't understand," Elena said desperately. "This isn't just a treasure. It's something else, something dangerous." Marcus laughed, but the sound was strained. Even he was beginning to notice the mansion's unnatural behavior. "Save the ghost stories. I've spent 5 years tracking down every lead about this place. Do you have any idea what's waiting down there? What I could do with that kind of power?" "Power?" Elena stared at him in disbelief. "You think you can control whatever this is?" As if in response to her words, the floor beneath them began to buckle. The ornate wooden panels split and warped, revealing the massive root system beneath. But these weren't ordinary roots. They moved with purpose, reaching up toward the men with their weapons. One of Marcus's men screamed as a root burst through the floor beside him, wrapping around his leg and dragging him downward. His gunfire went wild, splintering ancient beams and shattering what remained of the mansion's elegant facade. "Maya!" "The window," Elena whispered urgently. She remembered seeing a large window in the eastern wall, hopefully low enough to reach from outside. Marcus was shouting orders at his remaining man, but the mansion was in full revolt now. The very air seemed to thicken, making breathing difficult. The temperature dropped noticeably, and frost began forming on the walls despite the summer morning outside. Elena grabbed Maya's hand and ran for the window, praying that whatever ancient force they'd awakened would be more interested in dealing with the heavily armed intruders than two fleeing women. Behind them, Marcus's voice rose above the chaos, no longer commanding but desperate, as he finally began to understand what he'd really been hunting all these years. The scream that escaped Elena's throat was raw, primal, a mother's anguish-given voice. She lunged forward, but Marcus's iron grip on her arm yanked her back as Vera disappeared into the earth, swallowed by shadows that seemed to writhe and coil like living things. "Mama!" Vera's voice echoed from somewhere below, distant and terrified, but alive. Alive. "Let me go!" Elena clawed at Marcus's hand, her fingernails drawing blood. "She's down there! My daughter is down there!" "Getting yourself killed won't help her," Marcus snapped, but his own face had gone pale. Whatever he'd expected to find in the tree's depths, it wasn't this. The hole where Vera had fallen wasn't just a gap in the floor. It pulsed with an otherworldly darkness that made the air itself feel thick and oppressive. Dr. Kane emerged from behind a twisted pillar, his tablet casting an eerie blue glow across his weathered features. "Fascinating," he murmured, apparently oblivious to Elena's distress. "The architectural scans show a secondary chamber system, pre-Columbian, but with modifications that shouldn't exist in this region." "I don't care about your archaeological theories." Elena wrenched free from Marcus, dropping to her knees at the edge of the hole. "Vera, can you hear me?" A weak voice drifted up from the darkness. "I'm okay, Mama. But it's weird down here." Marcus pulled out a tactical flashlight, its beam barely penetrating the unnatural gloom below. "How far down?" he called. "Not far. Maybe 10 feet? But, Mama, there are things down here, old things." Elena was already swinging her legs over the edge when Marcus grabbed her again. "You go down there blind. You'll just make things worse. We need rope. She's scared and alone. And she'll stay alive if we do this right." His voice carried a sharp authority that cut through Elena's panic. "Kane, what does your equipment show?" The archaeologist adjusted his tablet, frowning. "The chamber appears stable, but there are electromagnetic anomalies. Significant ones, almost as if—" He trailed off, his face growing troubled. "As if what?" Elena demanded. "As if something down there is generating its own energy field." A chill ran down Elena's spine that had nothing to do with the tree's ancient shadows. The stories grandmother Rosa had told her, the warnings about things that should stay buried, Suddenly, they felt less like folklore and more like prophecy. Marcus uncoiled a length of rope from his pack with practiced efficiency. "Vera, I'm lowering a rope. Can you see it?" "But, Mr. Marcus, you should see this place. There are pictures on the walls and gold things and something that looks like—" Her voice cut off abruptly. "Vera?" Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Vera, answer me!" Silence stretched like a taut wire, broken only by the whisper of wind through the trees' hollow chambers. Then, faintly, they heard it, a low humming that seemed to come from the very walls around them. "That's not possible," Kane breathed, his tablet beeping frantically. The energy readings just spiked by 300%. The humming grew louder, and Elena felt it in her bones, a vibration that made her teeth ache and her vision blur. Around them, the bioluminescent moss began to pulse in rhythm with the sound, casting dancing shadows that seemed to move independently of their light source. "We're getting her out. Now." Elena grabbed the rope, but Marcus blocked her path. "I'll go. I've got the training for this. She's my daughter, and you're no good to her dead." His eyes held hers, steady and implacable. "Trust me." The word trust felt foreign in her mouth, especially applied to a man who'd broken into her sanctuary with weapons and demands. But as she looked into his face, she saw something beyond the hardened mercenary, a flicker of genuine concern that surprised them both. "Bring her back," she whispered. Marcus nodded once, then repelled into the darkness with smooth, practiced movements. Elena watched his light grow smaller until it was just a pinprick in the abyss. "Remarkable," Kane muttered, still absorbed in his readings. "The energy signature is unlike anything in the archaeological record. It's almost as if the structure itself is alive," Elena finished, the word falling from her lips unbidden. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Some trees are doors, Mija, and some doors should never be opened." The humming stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so complete it felt like a held breath. Then Marcus's voice crackled up from below, tight with something Elena couldn't identify, or fear, or both. "You need to see this," he called. "Both of you. But Elena, you need to know. What's down here, what Vera found, it changes everything. The treasure isn't just gold and jewels." Elena's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean?" "I mean, your grandmother's stories weren't stories at all." The sound of Emma's scream still echoed in Sarah's ears as she pressed herself against the twisted bark of the ancient tree's interior wall. Through the mansion's windows, she could see flashlight beams cutting through the darkness outside. Marcus and his remaining men were closing in, their patience finally exhausted. "Amma, I can hear them," Emma whispered, her small hand clutching the leather-bound journal they'd discovered in the vault. The child's face was pale in the amber glow of the tree's bioluminescent veins, but her eyes held a strange new understanding that made Sarah's heart ache. Sarah pulled her daughter closer, feeling the weight of the gold coins in her backpack, a fraction of the treasure that lay buried in the chambers below. But it wasn't the gold that terrified her now. It was what Emma had become since touching that crystalline root system in the deepest vault. The front door exploded inward with a thunderous crack. Heavy boots stomped across the living wood floor, and Marcus's voice boomed through the mansion's organic corridors. "Sarah Chen, I know you're in here. You've seen what this place can do, haven't you? What it's done to your little girl?" Emma flinched at his words, and Sarah noticed the way the walls around them pulsed brighter in response to the child's emotions. The connection was undeniable now. Emma was somehow linked to the tree's ancient consciousness, just as the journal described happening to others throughout the centuries. Sarah had read enough of the journal's entries to understand the pattern. The tree chose guardians, bonding with those pure enough to resist its treasure's corrupting influence. But the price was always the same. The guardian became part of the tree's eternal watch, never able to leave, aging slowly as decades passed like days. "We need to get to the root chamber," Sarah whispered urgently. "The journal says there's another way out through the old tunnel system." Emma nodded, But as they crept toward the hidden staircase, the girl suddenly stopped. Her eyes had taken on that unsettling luminescent quality again, matching the tree's amber glow. "Mama, they're not just here for the gold," Emma said, her voice carrying an otherworldly echo. "The man with the scar, Marcus, he knows about the binding ritual. He wants to use me to control the tree itself." Sarah's blood ran cold. The journal had mentioned such rituals in its darker passages, ways to corrupt the bond between guardian and tree, turning the ancient protector into a weapon. With the tree's power, Marcus could create an empire built on supernatural force. Footsteps thundered overhead as Marcus's team searched the upper chambers. Sarah could hear furniture being overturned, walls being struck, the systematic destruction of men who viewed the living mansion as nothing more than an obstacle. "This way," Sarah breathed, guiding Emma toward a section of wall that looked solid but gave way at her touch. The tree recognized Emma's presence now, opening passages that had remained sealed for generations. They descended through corridors that grew increasingly organic, the walls breathing softly around them. Roots hung like curtains, and pools of that amber light collected in natural basins carved from living wood. The air itself seemed thick with ancient magic and whispered secrets. Behind them, Sarah heard Marcus shouting orders. "Find the stairs. There has to be a way down to the main vault, and watch for the woman. She's more dangerous than she looks." Emma suddenly stumbled, pressing her free hand against her temple. The journal slipped from her grasp, and Sarah caught it just before it hit the ground. "The tree is frightened," Emma gasped. "It's been sleeping for so long, but now it's waking up because of all the violence. Mama, I can feel its memories, hundreds of years of them, all the people who tried to take the treasure, all the guardians who died protecting it." Sarah helped her daughter to her feet, but she could see the change accelerating. Emma's skin had taken on a faint luminescence, and when she touched the walls now, the entire corridor responded with waves of light. "We're going to find that tunnel," Sarah said firmly, though her heart was breaking. "We're going to get out of here, and we're going to figure out how to break this connection." But even as she spoke the words, Sarah knew she was lying. The journal had been clear. The bond, once formed, was permanent. The only question was whether Emma would retain her humanity or be consumed entirely by the tree's ancient consciousness. A new sound echoed from above, the screaming of tortured wood as Marcus's men used tools to force their way through the tree's defenses. The mansion shuddered around them, and Sarah realized they were running out of time. Emma looked up at her with eyes that now glowed like stars in the amber darkness. "Mama," she said softly, "I think I know what we have to do. But you're not going to like it." The footsteps above grew louder, and somewhere in the depths below, Sarah could swear she heard the sound of something immense beginning to stir. The ancient roots beneath Maya's feet pulsed with a rhythm that matched her racing heart. She pressed Emma closer as the mansion's walls groaned and shifted around them, responding to Marcus's frantic excavation above. Through the translucent bark ceiling, she could see his team's flashlights cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. "The tree's dying," whispered the voice that had become her constant companion. Whether her own intuition or something far older, she no longer knew. Each strike of their tools weakens the bond between worlds. Emma stirred in her arms, her fever-bright eyes reflecting the golden veins that now spider-webbed across every surface. "Mama, the lights are getting dimmer." It was true. The bioluminescent network that had illuminated their sanctuary was flickering, sections going dark as the damage above severed crucial connections. Maya realized with growing horror that Marcus wasn't just hunting for treasure. His assault on the tree's root system was systematically destroying the mansion's life support. A tremendous crack echoed through the chamber as another section of ceiling splintered. Dirt and debris rained down, and Maya caught a glimpse of metal, the edge of an excavator's bucket tearing through bark that had protected this place for millennia. "We have to move," she told Emma, though every instinct screamed against leaving their refuge. But staying meant being buried alive as the mansion collapsed around them. They climbed the spiral staircase carved into the tree's interior, each step taking them closer to the surface and to Marcus's men. The golden veins in the walls pulsed more frantically now, like a massive heartbeat struggling to maintain its rhythm. Maya could feel the tree's pain as a physical ache in her chest. At the third level, she paused. Through a gap in the bark wall, she could see Marcus directing his crew with military precision. He'd brought more than treasure hunters. These were professionals, equipped with industrial excavation equipment that made quick work of the ancient wood. 20 feet down, Marcus called to his men. The ground-penetrating radar shows a large hollow directly beneath the main trunk. Maya's blood chilled. The chamber he sought wasn't just any hollow. It was the heart of the tree's root system, the nexus point where all the golden veins converged. She'd glimpsed it during her first exploration, a cathedral-sized space filled with what looked like liquid starlight. Destroying it would kill not just the tree, but everything connected to it. Emma tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, look." Following her daughter's gaze, Maya saw them. Dozens of small, luminous figures moving through the mansion's corridors. Not quite human, not quite plant. They seemed to be made of living wood and light. Some carried what looked like seedlings, others bundled precious books and artifacts in gossamer wrappings. "They're evacuating," Maya breathed, understanding flooding through her. These guardians had protected the tree's treasures for generations, but now they were preparing for its death. One of the figures approached them, taller than the others, with bark-like skin etched in spiraling patterns. When it spoke, its voice rustled like wind through leaves. "The covenant is broken. The tree's protection fails. You must choose now, flee with your child, or stand with us in the final defense." The mansion shuddered again as Marcus's excavator found purchase in the main trunk. More ceiling collapsed, and Maya could smell smoke. Someone had started a fire to clear away the smaller roots more quickly. "What kind of defense?" Maya asked, though part of her already knew the answer. The guardian gestured toward the heart chamber. "The tree's death will release energies that have been contained for 1,000 years. Guided properly, that release could preserve the treasures and punish those who would desecrate this place. But it requires a willing conduit, someone bonded to the tree's essence." Maya looked down at her hands. The golden veins that had been spreading across her skin since their arrival now pulsed in sync with the tree's flickering network. She was already becoming part of it, she realized. The question was whether she would guide that transformation or be consumed by it. "Mama?" Emma's voice was small, frightened. Above them, Marcus's voice rang out triumphantly. "There! I can see the chamber. Bring the shaped charges. We'll blow through the rest of this root mass." Explosives. He was going to use explosives on a living tree that had sheltered them, fed them, protected them. Maya's growing connection to the ancient being filled her with its outrage, its desperate desire to preserve what it had guarded for so long. She handed Emma to the guardian. "Keep her safe. Get her far from here." "Mama, no!" Emma reached for her, but Maya was already descending toward the heart chamber, toward the convergence of all those golden veins. The tree's voice whispered through her bones, "The price of preservation is transformation." "Are you certain?" Maya thought of Emma's future, of Marcus's greed, of all the knowledge and beauty that would be lost if this place died unmourned. "I'm certain." The golden light embraced her like coming home. The explosion had torn through the mansion's foundation like a cancer, spreading cracks through the ancient tree's living walls. Maya pressed her back against the trembling bark, feeling the pulse of something dying beneath her feet. The golden chamber lay in ruins below, but Constantine's men were already regrouping, their flashlights cutting through the settling dust. "The whole structure's compromised," Elena whispered, her face pale in the dim light filtering through the shattered ceiling. "We need to evacuate everyone." But Maya wasn't listening to the structural engineer's assessment. She was listening to something else entirely, a low, mournful sound that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The tree was singing its death song. Sophie gripped her mother's hand tighter. "Mom, the walls are bleeding." Maya looked where her daughter pointed and felt her stomach lurch. A dark, viscous liquid was seeping through the bark walls, pooling on the floor with an acrid smell that made her eyes water. Not blood, something far older and more poisonous. The tree's root system extends for miles, Elena said, understanding flooding her voice. If it dies, if the poison spreads... A gunshot cracked through the air, and Marcus stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. Constantine emerged from the stairwell, his pristine suit now torn and dusty, but his gun steady as ever. "How touching," he said, his accent thick with rage. "A family reunion in a dying tree. You've cost me billions, Mrs. Chen. The least you can do is die quietly." Maya stepped protectively in front of Sophie, but her daughter surprised them all by stepping forward instead. "You don't understand what you've done," Sophie said, her young voice carrying an odd authority. "The tree isn't just dying, it's angry." Constantine laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the curved walls. A child's fairy tale. How... The floor beneath his feet suddenly buckled, and a massive root, thick as a man's torso and black with corruption, burst through the wooden planks. It wrapped around Constantine's leg with predatory intelligence, dragging him toward a widening crack in the floor. His scream cut off abruptly as more roots erupted from the walls, seeking, grasping, pulling. The tree was consuming everything. The gold, the intruders, the poison they'd brought into its heart. "Run!" Maya shouted, grabbing Sophie and Elena. Marcus followed despite his wound, pressing his good hand against the bleeding shoulder. They raced through corridors that were reshaping themselves, the tree's ancient consciousness turning inward, folding its passages like origami. Doors that had been there moments before sealed themselves with growing wood. New passages opened, leading deeper into the tree's core. "We're lost," Elena gasped, as they paused at an intersection of 3 tunnels. The tree's changing too fast. Maya closed her eyes, trying to remember the path they'd taken when they first entered. But that felt like years ago, not hours. The tree had welcomed them then, shown them wonders. Now it was dying, and taking everything with it. Sophie tugged at her mother's sleeve. "This way," she said with quiet certainty. "Honey, we don't know where that leads." "I do." Sophie's eyes had that strange, distant look again. "She's showing me." They followed the 8-year-old through passages that grew narrower and more organic with each step. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat, and Maya realized they were moving up through the tree's trunk toward its crown. Behind them, the sounds of destruction grew louder. Constantine's remaining men were either dead or fled, but the tree's collapse was accelerating. The poisonous sap was spreading, killing the vast organism from within. They emerged onto a platform Maya had never seen before, high in the tree's canopy. Real sunlight streamed through gaps in the leaves, and fresh air filled their lungs after hours in the mansion's recycled atmosphere. There, Sophie pointed to a series of branches that formed a natural ladder leading down the tree's exterior. As they began their descent, Maya caught a glimpse of the mansion's interior through a gap in the trunk. The golden chamber was completely flooded with black sap now, the ancient treasures disappearing beneath the toxic tide. Whatever wealth the tree had guarded was lost forever. Marcus slipped on a wet branch, and Elena caught him before he could fall. "Almost there," she encouraged, though her own hands were shaking with exhaustion. They reached the ground just as the tree's death song reached a crescendo. The massive trunk shuddered, and Maya heard the groaning of wood under impossible strain. Cracks raced up the bark like lightning, and leaves began falling like snow. "Keep moving," Maya urged, pulling Sophie away from the tree's base. They stumbled across the clearing toward the forest's edge, not stopping until they reached the safety of the younger trees. When Maya finally turned back, the ancient guardian was still standing, but barely. Its crown listed at an unnatural angle, and the bark had turned black in spreading patches. They had survived, but at what cost? The tree that had sheltered them, that had shown Sophie such wonders, was dying because of the greed it had tried so hard to protect itself from. The gunshot echoed through the mansion's roots like thunder, and Sarah felt the ancient wood shudder around them. Dust rained from the ceiling as Marcus lowered his smoking pistol, his face twisted with rage. "That was a warning," he snarled, stepping over the fallen branch that had missed Elena by inches. Next one goes through the girl. Sarah's heart hammered as she pulled her daughter closer, feeling the child's trembling body against her own. The golden chamber that had seemed so magical moments before now felt like a tomb, the pulsing veins of light casting eerie shadows across Marcus's scarred face. "The tree won't let you take it," Sarah said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Can't you feel it fighting back?" Marcus laughed, but there was an edge of nervousness to it. "Fairy tales won't save you now. Chen, get those charges set. We'll blow our way out if we have to." Chen hesitated, his weathered hands hovering over the explosives in his pack. "Boss, maybe we should listen. This place, it's not natural. The way the passages keep shifting the sounds, it's an old tree with old tricks," Marcus snapped. "Nothing more." But as he spoke, the golden light began to pulse faster, and Sarah could swear she heard something, a whisper like wind through leaves, though they were deep underground. The voice of the tree, she realized. It was trying to tell her something. Dr. Reeves, who had been silent since they'd entered the chamber, suddenly stepped forward. His academic composure had cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he said to Marcus. "I've spent 20 years researching this place. The tree isn't just guarding treasure, it's guarding something far more dangerous. More dangerous than a bullet?" Marcus raised his weapon again. "Yes," Reeves's voice cracked. "The gold isn't the real treasure. It never was. The tree is a prison, Marcus. Those ancient symbols on the walls, they're not decorations, they're bindings." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the underground air. She looked at the intricate carvings surrounding them, noticing for the first time how they seemed to writhe in the shifting light, how they formed an unbroken chain around the chamber's perimeter. "What kind of prison?" she whispered. Reeves's face was pale with sweat. The indigenous people who planted this tree weren't creating a treasure vault. They were containing something that should never be freed. The gold was just bait, to ensure someone would always be here to guard it. Elena pressed closer to her mother. "The lady in white," she whispered. "She told me the tree is sleeping. She said if it wakes up angry, bad things happen." Marcus's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Ghost stories from a child? You're all mad." He gestured to Chen. "Set the charges, now." But as Chen reached for his pack, the chamber shuddered again. Not from outside force this time, but from within. The golden veins in the walls began to pulse erratically, and the temperature dropped so suddenly that their breath became visible. "It's waking up," Elena said, her voice small but certain. The whispers grew louder, no longer gentle but urgent, warning. Sarah found herself understanding them somehow, as if the tree was speaking directly to her mind. Images flashed before her eyes. The original guardians, generations of them living in harmony with the ancient entity below. The careful balance they'd maintained. The catastrophe that would follow if that balance was destroyed. "Sarah." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through her bones. "You must choose." "Choose what?" she said aloud. Marcus spun toward her. "Who are you talking to?" But Sarah barely heard him. The tree's voice filled her consciousness, showing her possibilities, futures branching out like limbs. In one, Marcus succeeded in blasting through the chamber, awakening something that would spread darkness across the land. In another, she found a way to stop him, but at a cost she could barely comprehend. "The guardianship must pass," the voice continued. "The compact must be renewed. Will you take the burden?" Understanding crashed over her like a cold wave. The beautiful mansion above, the perfect safety she'd found. It hadn't been chance. The tree had been calling to her, seeking a replacement for whatever guardian had come before, a desperate mother, someone with enough to lose that she'd never abandon her post. Elena tugged at her sleeve. "Mummy, the pretty lady says you have to decide soon. She says the angry man is going to break something important." Sarah looked at her daughter, then at Marcus, who was growing more agitated by the second. Chen had his explosives ready, waiting for the final order. Dr. Reeves watched her with desperate hope in his eyes. The weight of the choice settled on her shoulders like a mantle. Freedom against responsibility, safety against sacrifice, her daughter's future against the world's. The golden light pulsed once more, expectant. The underground chamber shuddered as another explosion echoed from above. Dust cascaded from the ancient stone ceiling while Maya pressed her back against the cold wall, clutching Emma close to her chest. The golden artifacts around them seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, their surfaces reflecting the flickering light of the dying torches. "They're coming through the floor," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible over the rumbling. Blood still trickled from the gash on his forehead, but his eyes remained sharp, calculating. "Those charges will bring down the whole root system." Maya felt the tree's consciousness stirring in her mind, its ancient voice filled with something she'd never heard before: fear. The explosions weren't just damaging the mansion above, they were severing the mystical connections that had kept the Guardian alive for millennia. Emma whimpered against her shoulder, and Maya realized her daughter was no longer just afraid. The child's small hands were glowing with the same golden light that emanated from the treasure around them. The curse was spreading, claiming its newest victim. "The ritual," Maya breathed, remembering the inscriptions they'd found earlier. "There has to be a way to break the connection before it's too late." Marcus shook his head grimly. "Every previous guardian died trying to escape. The tree doesn't let go of what it claims." Another explosion, closer this time. Chunks of stone crashed down near the chamber entrance, and Maya could hear Voss's men shouting orders above. They had minutes, maybe less, before the mercenaries broke through. But as Maya looked around the treasure chamber, she noticed something the previous guardians might have missed. The golden artifacts weren't randomly placed. They formed a pattern, a circle with the ancient stone altar at its center. The same altar where she'd first touched the tree's root system and become bound to this place. "The treasure isn't the curse," she realized suddenly. "It's the key." Marcus frowned. "What are you talking about?" Maya gently set Emma down and moved toward the altar, her hands already tingling with the tree's energy. "Look at the arrangement. Every piece of gold, every artifact, they're positioned precisely. This whole chamber is a massive ritual circle." The tree's voice whispered through her mind, and she understood. The previous guardians had all tried to escape by force, by breaking their connection to the ancient entity. But the tree had been trying to tell her something different all along. It didn't want another guardian. It wanted to be free. "The original builders didn't create a trap," Maya said, her voice growing stronger. "They created a prison. The tree has been guarding the treasure for so long that it's forgotten how to exist without it." Emma's glow was intensifying, and Maya knew they were running out of time. The curse would claim her daughter completely if she didn't act soon. But she also knew that what she was about to attempt had never been tried before. She placed her hands on the altar's surface, feeling the ancient stone warm beneath her palms. The tree's consciousness flooded through her, and she experienced centuries of loneliness, of duty, of an endless vigil over riches that had lost all meaning. "I understand now," she whispered to the ancient entity. "You're not protecting the treasure from us. You're protecting us from the treasure. But you're tired, you want to rest." The chamber filled with golden light as Maya began to channel the tree's energy, not fighting against the curse but embracing it. She felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her, the responsibility of guardianship, the terrible isolation of eternal duty. But she also felt something else, the tree's gratitude. Emma's glow began to fade as Maya drew the curse into herself, accepting the full burden of guardianship. The ancient entity's relief washed through her mind like cool water, and she understood what needed to happen next. "Maya, no!" Marcus reached for her, but the golden energy surrounding her was too intense to approach. The explosions above had stopped. Voss and his men had broken through, and she could hear their boots on the stone stairs leading down to the treasure chamber. They would be here within moments, and when they arrived, they would find something very different from what they expected. Maya looked at her daughter, whose eyes were clear and bright once again, free from the curse's influence. She looked at Marcus, who had risked everything to help them, and she looked at the treasures surrounding them, gold and jewels that had claimed so many lives over the centuries. The tree's voice whispered one final secret in her mind, and Maya smiled despite everything. The ancient builders had been cleverer than anyone realized. The real treasure wasn't gold at all. Heavy footsteps echoed in the chamber entrance. Voss appeared at the top of the stairs, his scarred face twisted in triumph, automatic weapon raised. Behind him, his remaining mercenaries spread out, their eyes widening at the sight of the golden hoard. Maya stepped forward, the tree's power flowing through her veins, and prepared to show them exactly what kind of guardian she intended to be. The ground beneath Elena's feet began to tremble as Marcus Blackwood descended into the chamber, his weathered face illuminated by the golden glow emanating from the walls. Behind him came 3 of his remaining men, their weapons drawn and eyes wide with greed as they took in the impossible sight before them. "Well, well," Marcus breathed, his voice echoing in the vast space. The stories were true after all. Elena pulled Sophie closer, positioning herself between her daughter and the intruders. The ancient chamber stretched around them like a cathedral of gold and crystal, its walls carved with symbols that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. At the center of the room stood a pedestal holding what appeared to be a sphere of pure, condensed starlight. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Elena called out, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "This place, it's not meant for us." Marcus laughed, the sound harsh and discordant in the sacred space. "Save your mystical warnings, sweetheart. I've been hunting this treasure for 15 years. A little ancient mumbo-jumbo isn't going to scare me off now." He gestured to his men, who began spreading out around the chamber's perimeter. As they moved, Elena noticed something that made her blood run cold. Where their boots touched the golden floor, the light dimmed, leaving dark patches that seemed to spread like infection. Sophie tugged on her mother's sleeve, whispering urgently, "Mama, the tree is angry. I can feel it." As if responding to the child's words, a deep rumble shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the carved symbols on the walls began to glow more intensely. The sphere at the room's center pulsed faster, its light shifting from warm gold to an ominous crimson. "What's happening?" one of Marcus's men shouted, stumbling as the floor beneath him cracked. Elena remembered the words from the ancient text she'd found upstairs. "The heart of the tree beats only for those who seek shelter, not dominion. Those who would steal its essence will find only death." "It's protecting itself," she realized aloud. "The tree, the treasure, it's alive. And you're killing it," Marcus snarled, raising his weapon. "Enough of this nonsense. Johnson, grab the orb, we're leaving." But as his man approached the pedestal, the chamber erupted into chaos. Vines burst from the walls, thick as a man's arm and moving with serpentine intelligence. They lashed out at the intruders, wrapping around their limbs and lifting them into the air. The temperature plummeted, and Elena's breath came out in visible puffs as an ancient presence made itself known. "Why do you bring destroyers to my heart?" The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, speaking directly into their minds. "For 1,000 years I have offered sanctuary to the lost and weary. Now you lead wolves to my door." Elena stepped forward, her hands raised peacefully. "I didn't know they would follow us. I only sought shelter for my daughter. We mean no harm." "I know your heart, Elena Morrison. I have felt your pain, your love, your desperation. You are welcome here always. But these others..." The voice turned cold as winter wind. "These others seek to wound me, to steal my essence and sell it to the highest bidder." Marcus, suspended 15 feet in the air by emerald vines, screamed his defiance. "I don't care what you are. That treasure is mine by right. By what right do you claim the dreams of stars? By what law do you harvest the hopes of centuries?" Sphere at the center began to spin, its light now blindingly intense. Elena shielded Sophie's eyes as the chamber filled with energy that made her skin tingle and her hair stand on end. The vines tightened around the treasure hunters, and she heard bones beginning to crack. "Wait!" Elena shouted. "Don't become a killer because of them. That's not who you are." The spinning slowed slightly. "What would you have me do? Release them to return with armies? Allow them to strip away my bark, drain my sap, sell my leaves to collectors who will never understand their true worth?" Elena thought quickly, feeling the weight of all their lives in her hands. "There's another way. Change them, make them forget, send them back to the world with no memory of this place, no desire for treasure. Let them start over." A long silence filled the chamber, broken only by the terrified whimpering of Marcus's men. Finally, the ancient voice spoke again, tinged with something that might have been amusement. "You would show mercy to those who threatened your child." "I would show mercy because my child is watching," Elena replied firmly. "I want her to learn that even in our darkest moments, we can choose compassion over vengeance." The sphere pulsed once, brilliant and warm. "Very well. But they will remember enough to fear this place should they ever think to return." The vines began to glow with soft white light, and one by one, Marcus and his men went limp, their eyes rolling back as ancient magic rewrote their memories and motivations. The ground shuddered beneath Elena's feet as Marcus clawed his way out of the collapsing chamber below, his face twisted with rage and desperation. Blood streamed from a gash across his forehead, and his expensive suit was torn and filthy. But his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, burned with an intensity that made Elena's stomach clench with fear. "You think you can destroy everything I've worked for?" he snarled, pulling himself onto solid ground. Behind him, the ancient chamber continued its death throes, centuries of carefully preserved artifacts crumbling into dust and rubble. "That fortune was mine!" Sophie pressed closer to Elena's side, her small hand gripping the leather pouch containing the 3 golden keys they'd managed to save. The mansion around them groaned ominously, its magical foundations destabilizing as the chamber below collapsed completely. "It was never yours," Elena said, keeping her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "The Keeper showed us the truth. That treasure was meant to stay hidden, to protect something far more valuable than gold." Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the shaking corridors. "Protect what? Some fairy tale about ancient guardians and magical trees? You're as deluded as that old fool was." He took a step forward, and Elena noticed the glint of metal in his hand, a knife he must have retrieved from his fallen men. The mansion lurched violently to one side, and Elena realized with growing horror that the entire structure was beginning to collapse. The magical tree that had sustained it for centuries was dying, its massive trunk splitting with sounds like thunder. Through the windows she could see the outer walls beginning to fade, reality reasserting itself as the ancient illusion finally broke apart. "We have to get out of here," she whispered to Sophie, but Marcus blocked their path to the main staircase. "Nobody's going anywhere," he growled. "If I can't have the treasure, then nobody can. We'll all go down together." But Sophie stepped forward, her young voice ringing clear through the chaos. "You don't understand. The treasure isn't gold or jewels. It never was." She opened the leather pouch and poured the 3 keys into her palm. They glowed with a warm golden light that seemed to push back against the darkness gathering around them. "These aren't keys to unlock treasure. They're keys to lock something away, something dangerous." Elena stared at her daughter in amazement. Somehow, in the brief time they'd spent with the Keeper, Sophie had grasped truths that had eluded Marcus despite years of research. The tree, the mansion, all of it. "It was a prison," Sophie continued, her voice growing stronger. "The real treasure was keeping something evil locked away. But now the locks are broken." As if summoned by her words, a new sound rose from the depths below them, a howling, inhuman cry that made the hair on Elena's arms stand up. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, and shadows began moving in ways that defied natural light. Marcus's confident sneer faltered. "What? What is that?" "Something your greed has set free," Elena said grimly. She grabbed Sophie's hand and made a desperate break for the window, but the knife in Marcus's hand caught her shoulder, sending her stumbling. "I won't let you escape to tell your ridiculous stories," Marcus snarled, raising the weapon again. But the shadows were moving faster now, coalescing into shapes that hurt to look at directly. The temperature plummeted further, and frost began forming on the walls. Marcus's attention wavered as something moved behind him, something with too many angles and edges that shouldn't exist. Sophie pressed the 3 keys together in her hands, and their light flared brighter. "There's still time," she whispered urgently. "The keeper told me, if we return the keys to the heart of the tree before it dies completely, we can renew the prison." Elena looked at the window, their escape route, then at her daughter's determined face. The howling from below was getting louder, and Marcus was backing away from whatever he'd seen in the shadows, his knife forgotten. "How do we get to the tree?" Elena asked. Sophie pointed to a section of wall that was shimmering like water. "Through there. But once we go, there's no coming back out. The tree will seal itself forever." Elena understood. To save the world from whatever ancient evil Marcus's greed had unleashed, they would have to sacrifice themselves. The thought of never seeing another sunrise, never watching Sophie grow up, tore at her heart. But then she looked at her daughter, brave, brilliant Sophie, who had figured out the truth when adults had failed, and knew there was really no choice at all. "Together?" Elena asked, taking Sophie's free hand. "Together," Sophie confirmed. Behind them, Marcus screamed as the shadows finally claimed him. Elena and Sophie stepped forward into the shimmering wall, carrying the keys toward their destiny in the heart of the dying tree.